Hi, everyone. I'm Sam Ekman of Gold Derby, and I am here with one of the stars of The Nevers on HBO, Amy Manson. And Amy, your character, you play Sarah, otherwise known as Malady. And she's a bit, a little unhinged when we first meet her. And you just have this very distinct, physicality. And I would love to just hear how you found her physicality and voice. What were your inspirations and how did you go about adopting that?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I think with Melody, I believe it or not, the dialogue came last. I wanted to find the frequency and her energy first and her physicality. And I think with Melody, she is an amalgamation of everything she hated about her former self. She hated herself as Sarah, that she didn't have a voice, she was a insecure Victorian woman, meek, didn't have a purpose, a job. And so Melody's everything that she hated about who she was prior to that. And she's mocking Sarah, which meant that I wanted to make sure everything was layered in truth, of course, and grounding. But at the same time that it was, that she was big and bold and enjoying it at the same time.
Hmm.
And I had to mix that with obviously understanding what she went through at the hands of this evil Dr. Haig and the severity of the abuse, and thinking about how he would have manipulated her mind through ECT machines, lobotomies, and also physically, what actually happened to her that impaired her speech, and made her really want to seek justice against the patriarchy, tear down the patriarchy, him being a part of that, I
Yeah.
think.
When you create a character like that, do you draw also from like real life people or research, or is it all sort of based in the script for you?
I think no, I definitely Eileen Wuornos was a big influence on me, and especially her last speech before she was executed, because she was almost, she had the moment, almost like the coming to Damascus moment that Sarah goes through prior to going into the asylum vehicle, where she really believes that she's the second, the coming of Christ. And, that's her purpose, and God is there, and she's had to go through all this pain, because there's a higher purpose for her. And I think that the, society in general, never mind the government, really let down Eileen. And I think the same goes for Melody. And also Billie Eilish, things, people like this. I think Britney Spears was a bit of an influence, and just everything that they had gone through, to get to a stage in their lives where you crack. How much can a human being take? And I think Melody, I respect her in a way because she's just got so much resilience. She could have, taken her life to suicide or become addicted to laudanum, ended up an alcoholic and passed away that way. But she's got a vendetta against the people who abused her, and she's got blinkers on. And unfortunately, anybody else who gets in her path, she's going to take down as well.
I think it's impressive because a lot of characters who are sort of easily identified as, crazy or the villain, end up coming off one note or painted with the same brush the whole time, if you will. But Melody has all these layers to her. Is it challenging for you to look at a character like that and see how am I going to layer this with humanity? Because so many of them just become they're the villain, so they're in this box.
Exactly. That's Sam. That was exactly what I didn't want to happen. And I wanted her to be human. And people behave the way they do because of their upbringings, because of what they've gone through in their life. And she has gone through so much. Thus far, we don't know what happened with her husband and why he was putting her into the asylum all the time. But I had to query whether she was a sociopath, all these sorts of I don't know, medical terms that I kind of approached for Sarah came to nothing really. It was more understanding the level of abuse that Malady went through and understanding what sort of mental state she ended up in. And I kind of came to the conclusion that she was in a hypermania state quite a lot of the time. So, you know, lack of sleep, she doesn't trust anyone. And she's, as I say, she's just got blinkers on. And it was hard to kind of keep that frequency and that need and that energy up at times, and to also put the dialogue on top. And I remember discussing with the producers at the beginning, and we decided that if anybody really understood Malady, then we haven't done our job. You know, so she's always sparky and she's almost like a shapeshifter, and these are her defense mechanisms to deal with herself and life. And of course we see in episode 1 on the opera stage that when Mary sings, Malady's feels, Mary unlocks something in Malady that she's trying so hard to suppress at all times, because as soon as she starts to feel, then in her head she becomes a victim, and Malady doesn't want to become a victim, because that's not God's purpose for her.
Right. And it's interesting too, because in that flashback episode where we see her as Sarah, we see really Laura Donnelly's character almost as villainous in that episode, because she sort of creates Malady, even though her character is the protagonist. What was it like filming that sequence with her? And did you always know the backstory from the start of the series, or was that just a surprise when you got that script?
Filming with Laura, it was because obviously we find out who she really is come episode 6. So there's quite, you know, there's this stoic front that she's got there, and to understand who she was within the asylum and why they became friends, I find that difficult. And I remember speaking to one of the writers at the beginning and needing a backstory between these two to give it weight, to give it gravitas, the deceit of her throwing, you know, her Malady under the bus, the injustice of that, and Sarah opening her heart and loving and trusting this woman, and then to have that all taken away and to not have somebody to speak to, and then to go through that level of abuse and to be, you know, in her own headspace for 3 years wondering why and why me. And I think I sat with that a lot, and in my own headspace, eventually I had to remove myself quite a lot, because it just obviously it gets so much. But just to understand like the weight of their situation as two females, two people who should love each other, so Sarah thinks, and get on, and that's not the case. And I think that's why Malady has severe trust issues. And so, you know, the weight, and it was just, I wanted to just bear her soul in that moment. The gift of the writing for Malady in the first 2 episodes is almost like she's got verbal diarrhea. You know, she's just tells the audience, she's the only one that's telling the truth. That the whole 6 episodes, you know, if everybody's clued in, it's there. She tells her story within the first 2, which I think is a wonderful thing. I've never played somebody who I don't think is redeemable. And I think through doing that, an audience, I hope, kind of forgives her, you know, that understands her plight and reasons with it in a convoluted way, I guess, but understands why she's doing what she's doing, much like Eileen, you know. Mm-hmm. So I hope they do rally with her.
And you know, talk about having a great sandbox to play in as an actor, and showing things, because you also, in addition to these 2 sides of the same character, you also are secretly, spoiler alert, in disguise as Effie, which there's that awesome scene of you walking down the street after her, the big, you know, attack on that little square, and you take off all of the outfit pieces and suddenly you're Malady again. It's a great reveal. It's a great new character. How did you approach that version? Were there aspects of Malady or Sarah that you wanted to shine through? How did you manage that aspect?
100%. That's an amazing observation, because as Sarah, you know, she always wanted to be the Effie, you know, the new woman, the independent woman, have a job, be in charge, be understood, and you know, be higher up the hierarchy than what she was, to have a purpose, I guess, and a mission. And I that they're always bubbling within one another. So the three are bubbling. So as Malady, there's always elements of, or as Effie, there's always elements of Malady turning at points. You know, we wanted to play with moments where she could just burst and come out, because it's almost, you know, Johnny from The Shining. It's gleeful. She's enjoying playing Effie and being in the lion's den. She's this close, but she's always a step ahead than everyone. You know, and that's the joy of episode 5, is that then you understand that she's plotted this in episode 1. You know, she's smarter than the bunch. She reads Nietzsche. You know, this is what she would have done as Sarah prior. And I think, and you know, so they're constantly there, and I had to be aware of it. And especially there was a moment where Effie is going, the first time she's going into Frank Mundy's office, and he turns really sharply. And we actually spoke a lot about that moment, because it's a quick Sarah, as though she's going to get hit moment. Yeah. So, you know, we try to kind of be aware of these sorts of moments, because the three are always, you know, it's one of those Matryoshka dolls that, you know, you just unlayer and layer, and there's so many layers within her, you know, and we don't even know really truly why Sarah as Malady playing Effie behaves the way she does, because we've not, although episode 6 is an origin story, it's not actually, you know, her and her husband living together, which is the true origin story, I guess.
Right. And you mentioned the term lion's den, and that to me feels like a very good description of that. I think it's episode 5, where Malady really sets up like a kill box essentially for her master plan. And the production design on this series is so incredible at recreating this really detailed period world. What is that like, actually having a real physical space to act in? Because in many series it would be mostly just green screen for most of the time.
I know we've been blessed on this, like what a team, Sam and Gemma Jackson. The sets are so immersive. I remember the first time I went into Penance's operation shop, and the intricacies and details, like down to the fine, minute, you know, writing on a piece of card, or it's, you know, that won't be frontal shot at all, but you can't help but just be in awe of Gemma's and her team's artistry, and that's what it's about. That's what I've tried to seat myself within this show, that I'm working with people at the top of their game, and I come in every day and everybody wants to be there, and everybody gets on like a house on fire, and everybody's just so creative and going that extra mile, and that trust in performance and performers and crew creates space to be able to play and fail sometimes, and to really push myself, my experience as an artist, like to truly go places that I found it quite hard at times to come back from, because that was Malady from the off. And you know, you either do a character like that justice, or why play the game? Because you're right, is what you said before, then it just becomes a generalization of, I've been abused, now I'm out to get my revenge. It's not, it's layered, it's darker, it's deeper. She's playing the end game, you know.
Yeah.
And more so than any other character in the show,
As we see.
yeah.
And I think that episode 2, that big episode for you with the reveal, was around the time when production was halted for COVID, or you'd come back from COVID, which obviously has affected a lot of entertainment this year. How did that change the vibe on set, if at all, when you all had to come back from this break of being away?
Yes, it changed. It changed a lot. I love sitting and being, you know, but if they have to light up a scene, I love just sitting there and watching the machine at play and watching everybody do their job. But as soon as we came back after COVID, it was almost like a tag team in and out of set. So I just asked if I could stay there and stand instead of getting standing in, and just watch people at play. But it was sad because, you know, makeup would come in and do touch-ups or blood or whatever I needed, and then the lighting would come in. And I think, I mean, to work for HBO has been a godsend, because we were able to be tested 3 times a week, and that's everybody from our glorious drivers and chefs to, you know, the execs or artists. But I don't think the only thing I mean, I don't think we lost anything in Net5, but just before we broke because of COVID, the hanging sequence, Malady's hanging sequence, was supposed to be contain over 1,000 essays. And that got whittled down in the end, probably 6 months later before we could film it, but it got whittled down to 40 stunt performers. So instead of this big spectacle, you know, lots of wide shots and you're down in this London Square, the town square, there's lots of close-ups. But it's stunning artistry at play.
Yeah.
Cinematography.
Well, since we have a bit of a wait now until we get the sort of part 2 of this season, the remaining 6 episodes. And so while we're in this waiting period, you, I think, have time to sort of, you know, sit and ruminate on this character. What are you sort of hoping to explore going forward with her? What are you most intrigued about that still hasn't been answered?
I think that I would love for her to be able to love herself and to understand what that is, and to reason with Amalia and to understand Amalia's plight. I'd love to work with Anne Skelly as Penance. And I think Malady would be curious as to why Penance wanted to save her. So I hope Malady goes on a crusade to kidnap Penance or something, befriend Penance in a way. And yeah, I think the Dr. Haig storyline, you know, I think that should be a long game, because of what she was subjected to over 3 years. So I'd love that, and I'd love to kind of bring out, you know, play more with her, you know, and I think there's something bigger. I think she's the one that's, you know, I hope it's the rise of Malady. When you know, she's been torched, so she will torch, and I think she's not mad. Her methods are madness, but she's not mad. And I think she's got so many more games at play that have been set up now that will come to fruition, even this season. But I was in the writer's room yesterday, so thank goodness I didn't say anything there. The storylines coming up is just such a gift. She's such a gift and such a human, and I do admire her. And I think there's a bigger story about empathy, and light and love, and, you know, how somebody can be just quashed by society and not given a chance, and rise up from the ashes almost, you know, just seeking revenge, but because it's justified, I think, and that's why I can understand her plight and give her truth, speak her truth. That's what I'm there to do. And I don't think I've ever had a character affect me the way Malady has, and stayed with me the way she has too. I've almost become friends with her in a weird way.
Well, it's great work. I can't wait to see where everything ends up when the show comes back. So thank you for sitting down with me. Everyone who's out there watching, make sure you subscribe to Gold Derby. Keep up to date with us throughout this season. And Amy, thank you so much again.
Thank you, Sam.